What can we do to fight back against big pharma and the compromised medical industry? We can become healthy and break free from the perpetual cycle of being poisoned by criminal organizations like most pharmaceutical companies. Come check out what may be the most powerful antioxidant known to man, C60 PurplePower. The benefits of C60 have been personally outstanding. I use it every day and I feel incredible. I have tons of energy, I sleep great, and I haven't even come down with a cold since I started using C60 over 2 years ago. You can even get C60 for your pets. Do your own research, click the link in the description, and check out their website. If you order from that link or use coupon code KNOWLEDGE10, you get 10% off your order plus free shipping. What is your health worth to you? Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Christopher John Bjerknes. First, a couple of announcements. Check out our website, forbiddenknowledge.news. This is the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network. This is where you find some of your favorite podcasts from our community, like Raised by Giants, Day Zero, Understanding Propaganda, What the Frick Live, and more. Forbidden Knowledge News is always available on Rockfin, Odyssey, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Rockfin is where you get our premium content. You also get all the premium content from every creator that's on Rockfin for only $10 a month. You just go to rockfin.com/FKN Plus, that's ROKFIN.com/FKN Plus to sign up, or we have a link right in the description. Finally, we could use your help with our documentary production. If you'd like to make a donation, anything is greatly appreciated. We have a PayPal link, or you can go to supportfkn.com. Any donation of $5 or more made through supportfkn.com, you get access to Corey Hughes' secret JFK forum and tons of information that will be going into his upcoming book and some that won't. So go check that out. Like I said, anything is greatly appreciated, guys. Today I want to welcome Christopher John Bjerknes. He is a researcher and author, best known for his scholarly investigations of the origins and occult beliefs of Christianity, Gnosticism, and Kabbalah, as well as the taboo history of the World Wars and Armenian genocide. He has published more than 20 books on these subjects and more. Christopher, welcome. How you doing?
Very good. How are you? Thank you for having me on.
I'm very good, and thank you for joining us. I've been looking forward to this. You've done some extremely deep dives into the origins and original beliefs of Christians, Gnostics, and Kabbalists, and how they affect us today, which we're definitely going to be discussing. I also want to dive into some of the books you have written, such as Satanic Secrets of Jesus Christ and Rise Above the Gods Who Ate Us. I can't wait to get into this stuff, but this is your first time on. Let's hear a little bit more about your background and what led you to research these topics.
I'm a scholar and independent researcher. I have written dozens of books and published thousands of articles. I've been somewhat of an internet personality since 2006 discussing these issues. I have never been a religious person, but I come from a very intellectual family, and we had always discussed religious matters. I had always studied philosophy since I was a child, and I realized very early on that Christianity was largely a plagiarism of Greek thought. And then when I began to study Einstein and the theory of relativity, I melded those things together, and my biblical understanding of biblical cosmology blended very well with the origins of Christianity in Greek thought and the differentiation of primordial chaos from light, and light as a demiurgical creation force that manifests the observable universe. And I realized that there was a distinction made in the Bible between this primordial chaos as a distinct universe of formlessness, emptiness, and darkness from the universe of light. And that in the initial passages of Genesis, those two universes are separated. And then later in the book of Leviticus, those two universes represent two distinct groups of people, the Israelites and the nations. And the God of Israel, Yahweh, not only separated the light from the darkness in a cosmological sense, he separated his lot, his people, from the nations and made them a special, distinct group of people in the understanding of those who crafted these mythologies. That is how they wanted to present cosmology. And that has very similar origins in the Greek myths, that there is this primordial chaos, which becomes the firstborn son in Judaism. And the primordial chaos in the beginning of creation pre-exists. And then light through this Orphic god, Phanes Protogenes, is emitted in a cosmic egg that explodes. And that light permeates the universe. And that commingling of light and darkness generates creation as a system of polarities. And in the beginning, the light is very strong, so it can impart great order to the universe. And in Judaism, that order takes the form of the Torah. The Torah is the book of creation that spells out how the present world is to unfold over the course of 6,000 years. And this 6,000 years is not a moment, it becomes a cycle. And at the end of the cycle, the darkness, the chaos, absorbs all of the light in that commingling of polarities. And the evil forces of darkness ultimately triumph, and the darkness assimilates that energy of the cosmic egg that explodes through the process of entropy, and all order breaks down, and then chaos triumphs. And in the Greek cosmological cycle, at the end of this period, which they would dub the end of the Iron Age, the universe experiences a great conflagration. Much as there was a flood on the earth to cleanse it of all the evil, there is a universal fire that consumes everything, and again leaves primordial chaos as a blank slate for the initiation of a new cycle. And that new cycle is the return of Phanes Protogenes as the cosmic egg, which then again explodes and emits this light into chaos to create new order and new forms in the universe, which are attempting to replicate the ideal form of the highest God, which in the Platonic system is referred to as the one or the monad. And I explain all of that in my book, Rise Above the Gods Who Hate Us.
That is fascinating. So in a way, we're in a cyclical type of reality that kind of breaks down and consumes itself into this dark type of existence that eats up all the light, and then it's like you said 6,000 years this occurs. And is this something that has been occurring since the dawning of our existence?
Well, I think the 6,000 years is something that comes from the idea of three zodiacal ages. And it represents the age of Taurus, followed by Aries, followed by Pisces. And this has deep religious significance And it's all allegorical. What it really signifies is human beings coming out of the forests and starting to generate civilization and build cities and learn how to utilize metals to create arms and armor, and they begin to kill one another. So that was perceived by the Greeks and adopted by the Israelites as the concept that human beings were given knowledge through Prometheus, who taught human beings how to utilize fire. And that was also allegorical among the Greeks. And in their later writings, they explained that that meant all the arts of civilization, utilizing agriculture, learning metallurgy, and creating advanced civilizations. And both the Greeks and the Israelites had the conception that this was actually kind of an evil process, because what it did was destroy the garden of nature, which provides human beings with everything that they need to sustain themselves. Everything required for sustenance is simply given, and no labor is required for it. So they viewed knowledge as a curse, because it cursed mankind to labor in the fields and to live in cities where nature was paved over and nature was destroyed. And they saw that as destroying the heavenly divine order that was created by the gods in the form of nature. And the gods feared that men were starting to become gods, and that eventually they would be able to use alchemy and other means to create their own living beings. And they would be able to ascend to the gods on Mount Olympus, or ascend the Tower of Babel to the heavens and slay the gods. So what the gods do in the biblical story is, in the Garden of Eden, they curse mankind for consuming this knowledge with death and with having to toil in the fields. Adam and Cain are forced to work the fields, and Cain becomes a wanderer who constructs cities. So that is how the cosmological cycle manifests itself in both the Greek system and in Judaism. But in Judaism, there are again these two universes which don't exist in the same way in Greek thought. The Greeks did not separate humanity into a group of human beings which represent the light and a group of human beings which represent the darkness. Instead, Plato viewed the human soul as a charioteer being pulled by a white horse, which represents the good aspect of human nature, and by a black horse, which represents the evil cravings of the body and the lusts of the body, which prevent the soul from ascending back to heaven, from which it descended as a divine spark. And in the Platonic system, human beings, the human soul is reincarnated over and over again to perfect it, so that eventually it learns to not listen to the dark horse pulling the chariot, but instead to follow the white horse up into heaven to reunite with the gods. And Judaism adopted all of that as the good inclination in the human soul and as the evil inclination, Yetzer Hara, in the human soul. But it mostly attributed the idea of this evil dark force to this other universe of darkness, which is separated from the light. But because this primordial chaos is the original firstborn son, the firstborn son inherits both the beginning of the cycle and the end of the cycle. And the end of the cycle is the world to come, which will happen when chaos has assimilated all of the light. And most people who study Judaism, the vast majority, are not aware of the fact that the ultimate aim of the Kabbalists is for evil to triumph and to absorb all of the light. And they want to break this cosmic cycle at the end so that chaos triumphs forever, because chaos is the highest firstborn soul, known as Yechida in Kabbalah. But they lament the fact that the non-Israelites existed before the Israelites. So the non-Israelites have this firstborn soul, which was given to the twin Esau and given to Cain, because Cain in Kabbalah is actually the son of Eve and the serpent from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and not the son of Adam and Eve. So it is the serpent who represents, the evil serpent represents primordial chaos, the firstborn son and the highest soul. That soul has been reincarnated. In Kabbalah, reincarnation is also a belief called Gilgul. And they believe that Jesus Christ is the reincarnation of Satan's soul through Cain and then through Esau, and then it entered into Jesus. It will be reincarnated 2 more times as Armilus, who is the Antichrist. The Christ returns as the Antichrist in Kabbalah. And I'll show you passages later on which explain this in the words of the Kabbalists. Then Jesus returns as Gog and Magog to destroy all the Christians and all the nations. Satan plays several significant roles in Judaism. He tempts through the evil inclination that I was discussing, through the black horse. He tempts souls to commit sin. And that's actually a good thing in Judaism because it provides a necessary test to weed out those souls which are weak so that they can be punished. And when they are punished, they then return in a better form. So Satan is actually seen as a good force who works for the gods and is a very important figure. So Jesus played that role. Jesus tempted the Israelites to worship him, which would be worshiping Satan and rejecting Yahweh. And then those that do, and all of the Gentiles who become Christians, will then receive the divine accusations and the divine judgment and be cursed by their worship of Satan, by their worship of Jesus Christ, and they will become damned. So when Jesus promises eternal life to those who believe in him, what he is really doing is tempting them to engage in the idolatrous worship of Satan and then become cursed. So Christianity was initiated as a trap for the Romans of the Roman Empire.
Oh, wow.
And what the plan was to get the Romans to abandon all of their gods, because the ancient peoples believed that the great empires of Rome, Egypt, Babylon, Persia, and Greece had all triumphed because their gods were the most powerful. And they witnessed the fact that Yahweh was always defeated, and they were able to conquer Judea. So they realized that Yahweh was actually a very weak God, and his temple in Jerusalem was defiled. It was defiled by Antiochus IV, and it was slated to be defiled by Caligula. And they would sacrifice pigs in the temple and put in images of Zeus and Apollo, and they believed that they had the inferior god, so they wanted to trade gods with the Greeks and Romans. And the process they undertook to do this was they duped the Romans into worshiping Satan in the form of Jesus Christ, who is the reincarnated soul of Satan through Cain. And then they adopted the highest gods of the Greeks by adopting Platonic philosophy and the Orphic mythologies, which became Adam Kadmon in Kabbalah, who is this god, Phanes Protogenes, who brings the divine light to cause creation. So what they did was they traded gods with the non-Israelites. And they believe at the end of this cycle, they will be able to kill off Yahweh and destroy order and the Torah by simply disbelieving in it. One of the main tenets of Kabbalah is that gods come into existence through believing in them in the form of an egregore, where if you have a group of consciousnesses that all conceive of this God then comes into existence and provides protection. So that was one of the means that they had of destroying the Romans and the Greeks, was to get them to disbelieve in their own gods so that those gods would die off and they would lose all of their supernatural protection. And there is an ancient Egyptian principle called as above, so below. It was inscribed in the Emerald Tablets, and it was adopted by Kabbalah. And they very much believe in this, that there is an earth in the heavens that mirrors our earth, and human beings mirror the gods, and the gods mirror human beings, excuse me, such that when the humans cease to believe in their gods perish. And the perishing of those gods causes those human beings to die off. So they were in effect engaged in supernatural warfare to dupe the Romans into abandoning their gods, which they then believed would cause the Romans themselves to die off.
So it seems that everything since the Roman times has been inverted, and all organized religion and modern religions that we know of are all based on falsehoods and greed and wars and the whatever the leaders in the highest order of the time wanted people to have beliefs in, and it's all based on lies. This is pretty insane, man. And I know you have a presentation that you want to get into. I'd love to see this and see where this takes us.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen so that I can exhibit some of the slides I have prepared.
And I'm also very curious. I've always been interested in the Gnostic view, and it seems that in a way it's kind of telling us a story about how these religions were hijacked. Do you think that's somewhat accurate?
What the Gnostic religions did in Judaism, there were two traditions. There was something called the written law, which is what we know of as the Old Testament or the Tanakh, primarily the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. That was what was written down. What was properly understood by the leading elites of Judea, they actually lived in Alexandria, Egypt, was that all of these stories were scripted in Alexandria, Egypt, in the 3rd century BC. The oldest form we have of this written Torah is from the Septuagint, which was written in Alexandria, Egypt in the 3rd century BC. It was not written in Hebrew or Aramaic, but instead in Greek, and it incorporated Platonic philosophy and the mystery religions of the Orphics and the Eleusinians. But that became a very secret, codified oral tradition. And the oral tradition was only passed down among scholars and the very elites of Alexandria, Egypt. And you hit the nail on the head when you said that everything is inverted. In Gnosticism, it is revealed that Yahweh is actually an evil force, because Yahweh is the God who imparts order to the chaos and destroys the freedom and knowledge of chaos. So the God of Israel, Yahweh, is acknowledged openly in the written works as well as the oral traditions of Gnosticism as an evil force. And he is renamed Yaldabaoth and Samael, which are both terms for Satan.
Right.
So the Satan of the Christians is actually the God of Israel. And from the Judaist perspective, it's inverted. It's the other way around. The God of Israel is the good God for the first 6,000 years, and it is Jesus who is Satan.
Right.
So, but the Gnostics acknowledge the fact that Jesus is what the Judaists had always considered to be Satan, because they openly said that he is the devil who was in the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So I'm going to flip through some of the slides which demonstrate that coded message, which those in the know have always understood. And the very early first Christians, the Gnostics, openly discussed the fact that Jesus is the serpent. And the several Gnostic cults were called serpent cults. They were called Ophites, which is the Greek word for snake, and they were called Naasines. And Nachash is the Hebrew word for snake. So they were both calling themselves snake religions.
Wow.
The Christian Kabbalists who emerged during the Renaissance acknowledged the fact that Jesus is Satan. And they had the concept of the pentagram, which has 5 points to the star. And the name for God in Hebrew is the Holy Tetragrammaton, composed of 4 letters, Yod He Vav He. And those 4 letters have a 5th letter to form the Pentagrammaton in Christian Kabbalah, to make a pentagram out of it. And it introduces a middle letter, Shin, which is composed of 3 vavs, in other words, 666, because all letters in Hebrew also signify numbers. And they said that Jesus' name is actually Yeshua, which is the Pentagrammaton with a Shin added in the middle. When the pentagram is pointed upwards, it represents the good aspect of Jesus, which is the human aspect of Adam and Eve. In Gnosticism and in Kabbalah, Adam and Eve were considered an androgyne. They were both male and female as Adam, and then Adam literally had 2 heads and was cut in half by the gods to form Adam and Eve. Satan was also initially an androgyne, and his male aspect was called Samael, and his female aspect was called Lilith. So when Jesus in Orthodox Christianity is acknowledged as having the dual nature of being human and being the Son of God, in the New Testament, he is called both the Son of Man and the Son of God. So he has this dual nature. But the Christian Kabbalists and the Gnostics acknowledged that the man form was the androgyne Adam and Eve, who is known as Jesus and Sophia in Gnosticism. Jesus is the male aspect. Sophia, wisdom, is the female aspect. And he is also Satan, and he is the male aspect, Samael, and the female aspect, Lilith. And when the Pentagrammaton is pointing downwards, it represents the godly aspect of Satan. And that is spelled Lameth, Vav, Yod, Tav, Nun, which spells Leviathan. Leviathan is the evil serpent, which is Jesus Christ.
Man.
Now you can see it very plainly in this image. The cross actually represents the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Jesus represents the serpent in that tree, providing knowledge to man and woman, Adam and Eve. When they consume the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they are consuming gnosis, knowledge. That's where the word Gnostic comes from. It is the Greek word for knowledge. So Jesus is the serpent returned to give Christians, to give Adam and Eve, human beings, gnosis, knowledge. And the way that he does that is by asking them to consume him. They consume his blood in the form of wine, and they consume his flesh in the form of bread. So what Christians are doing when they become Christians is consuming the knowledge of good and evil in the same way that Adam and Eve were tempted by Satan to consume the knowledge of good and evil. So Jesus is that same being. He is Satan, but they believe that knowledge was good, and Yahweh was evil because he tried to keep human beings from obtaining that knowledge, which would turn human beings into God and ultimately allow chaos to triumph over light. Here you can see Christ in the tree of knowledge, And the symbology to those in the know would be that the tree is the cross and Satan is the serpent. And Christians are Adam and Eve consuming the gnosis. It's also important to understand that at this time that Christianity was formed, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was considered to be a grapevine. And that is why Jesus offers up his blood in the form of wine. He is giving the fruit of that grapevine to humanity to consume as knowledge, gnosis.
Do you think that Jesus was an actually incarnated human being at all? It doesn't seem like he would have even had to be, based on everything you're saying and the way that they presented all this information.
Jesus was described in the Old Testament as this figure who would come and tread the winepress. Treading the winepress means extracting the blood from those you kill. And this figure in Isaiah chapter 63 is clearly described as this man who will come and kill all the non-Israelites and extract their blood to feed to the gods. And this comes from an ancient Egyptian god named Shesmu. Shesmu was also the god who treaded the winepress to extract the blood of human beings and all the other gods, the way that Jesus kills off the pagan gods by causing Christians to abandon their worship of their own gods. Shesmu would actually literally butcher the other gods in the Egyptian pantheon and then feed them to his master god Unas, who takes the form of Yahweh. And he would extract their blood and make wine out of it for Unas to drink. So Jesus symbolizes all that, and I'll show that in a series of slides later. Let's just quickly go through how in Christian iconography, Jesus is portrayed exactly the same way that Satan is portrayed. Jesus on the cross is portrayed exactly as Satan in the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because that's who Jesus is. Yeah. So you can see here, this is Satan with the face of Lilith, his female aspect, offering gnosis, which is the fruit that he gives to Adam and Eve. So Satan is Jesus. Gnosis is the fruit, which becomes the wine, the grapes of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the cross is the tree itself. Same images. The tree is the cross, Jesus is the serpent, Christians are Adam and Eve. This is Satan hanging on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and this is Adam and Eve absorbing the gnosis, the knowledge of his blood, which is the grape juice, the wine extracted from the fruit of gnosis, of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Okay, let me jump now to...
Would you say that all these Abrahamic religions are basically a trap to get you back into this same Judaic kind of worship?
Yes, they are exchanging the pagan gods for the Abrahamic gods, so that the people who are the firstborn, the non-Israelites, lose their soul. So what Jesus is actually doing is stealing all of the souls, and that's what Shesmu would do. That's why Unas would drink the blood, because the blood was always considered the origin of the soul. That's why in a kosher diet, you cannot consume blood, because if you consume the blood, even of kosher animals, you absorb their souls. So Jesus is stealing the souls of the non-Israelites and feeding them to his father Satan and to Yahweh. This is a portrayal of John the Evangelist, who was Jesus's lover in the Bible. And the Holy Grail that Jesus offers up his blood in the form of wine is referred to in the Old Testament as the, let me get my highlighter going, it'll help me. Can you now see my highlighter image?
Yeah.
Jesus is in this cup of God's wrath, which in Jeremiah is described as the poison that is given to the non-Israelites to exterminate them. So when Christians consume the Eucharist and drink Jesus's blood, they are actually poisoning themselves to death. And remember that the curse that Adam was given for consuming gnosis was death. He was cursed to die, and so was Eve.
Yeah.
So you can see here the image again is that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is the grapevine. And Jesus is offering that in the form of his blood as the Eucharist, as wine. And in many Christian images, you see Jesus trampling the grapes in the winepress, which means exterminating human beings. And that's made clear both in the book of Revelations, where he comes back to tread the winepress, and that is explained as killing so many people that their blood will flow to the level of a horse's bridle. That's how deep the oceans of blood that Jesus will spill will be. And that's also explained in the Old Testament in Isaiah chapter 63 as this messianic figure who smites the non-Israelites and exterminates them. Here again, you see the grapevine as the tree of knowledge, which is the cross, and Jesus is the serpent on the tree of knowledge. Here he is filling the cup of God's wrath with his blood. They gather the blood and they feed it to the angels, which is extracting the souls of Christians to give to Yahweh so that he can gain the magical powers and transfer that higher soul of the firstborn to the Israelites in the form of Jacob. Jacob was renamed Israel by Satan. And what they want to do, because they are the second born, is steal the soul of the firstborn through Christianity and absorb it so that they inherit the world to come. And so that the soul is lost to the non-Israelites and they trade places with them, which is what Jacob did to Esau. He gave him a bowl of porridge, red lentil porridge, red like blood, in exchange for his birthright and his blessings. That birthright and those blessings are the soul of the firstborn. Here again, you can just see all of this persistent Christian iconography of Jesus treading the winepress. Yeah. This mirrors the Egyptian iconography of the god Shezmu, S-H-E-Z-M-U. The bunches of grapes represent human heads bundled together, and that is explained in the Egyptian hieroglyphics. Again, they are gathering it in the cup of God's wrath, and Jesus is treading the winepress. And the extraction of the winepress represents the extraction of blood.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So you can see it was a persistent image, and they are always gathering the blood to feed to the angels and to feed to God.
Oh, man.
And if you'll allow me, I will show how that mirrors the Egyptian belief in Shezmu.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That is how Shezmu is spelled. People can look it up. I explain it in volume 2 of Satanic Secrets of Jesus Christ. I quote these sources which describe Shezmu, which is mirrored by Jesus. Shezmu was also the god of perfume. Jesus's feet were perfumed as part of his anointment ritual for death and as his anointment for kingdom. And Shezmu was the divine perfume maker. This is Shezmu traveling on the boat in the underworld to capture the souls. Here you can see that the hieroglyphic for Shesmu is represented by the wine press. The Egyptians had a form of the wine press, which was a large canvas bag. They would first trample it with their feet in the same way, and then they would get every last bit of blood, every last bit of the juice by putting it in a canvas bag and then twisting that bag like you twist a towel to extract all the water out of it. So that is the name Shesmu, and you can see it's represented by the wine press. This talks about how Shesmu is the god of the wine press and that he extracts the blood of the wine to feed the god Unas. And he feeds Unas not only the blood of human beings, but the magical powers of all the other gods. And that is the purpose of killing them and extracting their blood and making wine of it, is so that Unas can absorb the magical powers and become the highest god. Shesmu, god of the wine press, gave Unas a vat of grape juice with which to make the wine in the next world. If people want to pause the video, they can read all of this, which explains all of this. It talks about Meat, which in Egyptian is the god of order. And it talks about Apep, the serpent of the underworld who kills the other gods. Shesmu is also depicted as a lion-headed god, which in Gnosticism becomes Yaldabaoth, and in the Greek Orphic mystery religions becomes Aramanius. Here again, you can see the wine press in the hieroglyphic. Here it's transliterated as Nemu, but in more modern translations, when they anglicize it, they call it Shesmu. This is the cannibal hymn. And again, if people want to read it, they can read through it. And it talks about, it translates Unas as Venus, God older than the oldest, which in Judaism is the Ein. And it talks about how he eats their hearts in order to absorb their magic. And Unas flourishes when their magic is in his belly. The commentary of notes is also important if people want to pause it and read it.
Hello, friends. I want to introduce you to my friend, Justin Padini. Justin is a self-proclaimed online court jester, comedian, and artist who uses his gift of humor to speak truth to power. Justin shares countless jokes freely online, and they're definitely not woke jokes. So please be sure to have on your big boy pants when you view Justin's content. He is also a featured speaker on the One Great Work Network and promotes other activists doing the great work. Justin is looking to reach like-minded individuals to promote the message of freedom and grow his network. Follow Justin on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and the One Great Work Network. That's Justin Padini, Pedini. All of his links are right in the description.
These are also further descriptions. It becomes very striking if you read the Old Testament in Isaiah chapter 63. I have trodden the winepress alone, and of the people there was none with me, for I will tread them in mine anger and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my garments, for the day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed is to come. So trampling the winepress signifies exterminating the enemies of Israel in the day of vengeance. And this was in Isaiah hundreds of years before Christianity was created. And then in Revelation, it describes Jesus as this vengeful figure who comes back as the Antichrist to kill all the Christians. And another angel came out of the temple, which is in heaven, There's not only a temple on earth, there's a mirror temple in heaven. And well, I won't digress. He also having a sharp sickle, and another angel came out from the altar, which had power over fire, and carried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, thrust in thy sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. Kabbalah explains, and many Gnostic texts explain, that the reason why the fruit of the tree of knowledge was poisonous when Adam and Eve ate it and cursed them with death was because the fruit wasn't ripe yet. And the purpose of the non-Israelites is to serve as the gardeners of this tree and to ripen that fruit. In other words, to develop science and technology and knowledge to the point at which they could convert human beings into gods. And it was supposed to happen over the course of this 6,000 year period. And at the very end of that 6,000 year period, which is right now, they always anticipated the idea that science and technology would enable human beings to become immortal and to return to an androgynous state. And in Israel, they are presently and have highly advanced developed technology which can convert human embryos into androgynes that are both male and female, and they are working on technologies to make mankind immortal. So they, in Kabbalistic terms, they would say that the fruit of the tree of knowledge has now been made ripe. Once that fruit becomes ripe, it then becomes kosher, and it imparts immortality instead of death. So everything reverses at the end of the cosmic cycle, and that's where they believe we are right now. But they also believe that in the hands of the non-Israelites, in the hands of the nations, that knowledge becomes so powerfully evil that it causes the extermination of human beings. And they explain that in the form of biological weapons, nuclear weapons, and chemical weapons. So all of their prophecies, which they have always taken to be plans, have been fulfilled and on the exact time scale that they anticipated. So the unripe fruit of knowledge of good and evil has become an extermination force and has produced the ripened force, which becomes the gift of immortality and androgyny. Continuing in Revelation, and the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth, which is all non-Israelites, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. That is extracting all of their blood and filling up the cup of God's wrath, which is the Holy Grail, which is the chalice in which Christians consume the Eucharist in the form of wine. The winepress produces wine, of course. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horse bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. And then in another passage in Revelations, it talks, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. He is righteous because he becomes the advocate of Israel. Initially, 2,000 years ago, he was the prosecutor, the accuser, and the punisher of Israel. And Israel had to be redeemed for its sin of worshiping the golden calf. So all of that was a necessary process. But at the same time, he was undermining all the non-Israelite nations by stealing all of their supernatural protection, making them into Christians. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. That word in the original Greek of this manuscript is Logos. Jesus is referred to as Logos. And so was Phanes Protogenus, this god that Jesus imitates from the Greeks. He was also the Logos. So this is describing Jesus and all the blood that Jesus will spill. Jesus is often depicted in a red or crimson or purple robe, which represents the blood, the wine that he's going to spill. Jesus is anticipated as returning as the Antichrist to reap the harvest of all the non-Israelite souls. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses clothed in fine linen, white and clean, and out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, and that with it he should smite the nations. The nations in Hebrew is the word goyim, which represents all non-Israelites. So Jesus is returning as the advocate of Israel to kill off all their enemies. That was also always Satan's role. On Yom Kippur, 2 goats were sacrificed. One was given to Satan in the wilderness, and the other goat was given to Yahweh in the sanctuary of the temple. When Satan would receive that second goat, he would get confused and he would no longer accuse Israel of all its sins. Satan is the father of all the non-Israelites through Eve and through their child Cain. So Satan is the guardian angel of the non-Israelites, the Goyim, the nations. Yahweh is the guardian of Israel. Both sides have to be given their due so that they are appeased. So when the goat, which is the scapegoat, is given to Satan, he stops accusing the Israelites of their sins and instead unjustly accuses the non-Israelites of the sins of the Israelites. So that's why on Yom Kippur, 2 goats are offered up, and one is given to Satan, who is the accuser in the heavenly court, so that he does not accuse Israel and instead betrays his children, the non-Israelites, and accuses them for the sins of the Israelites. And that's where the expression scapegoat comes from. It comes from this myth of burdening the non-Israelites with the sins. And this is important to understand because Jesus is the scapegoat. And he was also predicted in Isaiah 53 to bear the iniquities, all the sins of Israel. But the big secret is that he places those sins on Christians. So when Christians bear their cross, as they are told to do, what they are really doing is becoming scapegoats for all the sins of Israel. And they will ultimately be judged for all those sins and exterminated in the end times. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, and with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So Christ is actually out to dupe the Christians into worshiping him so that he can eventually judge them and exterminate them. And that was recognized by the major Gnostic writers in the Gospel of Judas. It specifically says that Jesus's disciples are out to deceive Christians and ultimately to kill them all off. And then the Israelites will be released of their sins and their souls will ascend to heaven. That letter Shin that I talked about in pentagram, Yeshua, Yod He Shin Vav He, is composed of the 3 letters Vav. Vav is the number 6 in Hebrew as well as the letter Vav. So the Shin represents 666. So Jesus actually represents the number of the beast. When you add up those 3 Vavs together with the Yod, which is the letter that forms the top of the Vav, you have 4 Yods. When you add it together also with the value of Shin itself, it all adds up to the number 358. Why is that significant? That is significant because the number 358 in Hebrew is also the same number for the word Nachash. Nachash, again, is snake or serpent, the evil Leviathan. So they are identifying Shin as the serpent and adding that to God's name to create Yeshua. 358 is also the same number for the word Mashiach in Hebrew. And Mashiach is the Hebrew word for Messiah. So they are identifying Jesus in three ways as the evil serpent, who is also the evil Messiah. In Judaism, there are two Messiahs, Messiah, son of Joseph, and Messiah, son of David. They represent the good serpent of light, the holy serpent of light, and the evil serpent of darkness. Jesus was literally called the Messiah, son of Joseph. Messiah, son of Joseph is Satan, the evil serpent. Messiah, son of David is different, and Jesus specifically said he was not the Messiah, son of David. This explains as above, so below. Excuse me, my voice is giving out. The Star of David represents the concept of as above, so below. The triangle pointed upwards is the male phallus, which is light. Light is conceived of as seminal fluid, which imparts creation into the darkness of the female womb. The womb is the triangle pointed downwards. So the phallus of light penetrates the darkness, imparts its seed, which then generates creation. You see the same imagery in the pentagram pointed up and the pentagram pointed out. This is as above, so below for the good universe of the Israelites. This is as above, so below for the evil universe of the non-Israelites. You see that the tree of death is the fig tree. The grapevine is the serpent winding its way up the fig tree. This also represents Aaron's staff and Moses' staff, and an Asherah pole, which is the worship of Satan. They would worship what they call groves, Asherah groves, which were these trees that signified the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Here you can see in 3rd Baruch, where it specifies the fact that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was a grapevine. This is contemporary with the Gospels. And the angel said to me, it is the vine which the angel Samael is Satan, the devil, whereat the Lord God was angry. And he cursed him and his plant. Well, also on this account, he did not permit Adam to touch it. And therefore the devil was being envious, deceived him through his vine. So this is proof that at the time that Christianity was created, it was believed that it was the devil who had planted the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and had appeared in that tree of knowledge of good and evil, and that that tree was a grapevine. So wine was considered something very evil, and Jesus offers his blood in the form of wine to Christians. So it should be very apparent to people that Jesus is out to poison them and curse them with the curse of death from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Man, this is so fascinating. I am blown away by all of this.
But it's very important to understand that I am interpreting this correctly because in the Sefer HaMashiv, which was written by the Kabbalists in the 15th century, it specifies that Jesus takes on the role of Satan. The author's association of Christianity with the devil or Samael appears in other remarks. And I'm not going to burden you too much going on, and I do very much welcome your questions, but I want people to understand that this is not something I've made up, that this is fully documented, and this is the current, present belief among Kabbalistic rabbis, that Jesus is Satan. People can pause this and read this. There was also earlier in the 13th century, one of the most eminent Kabbalistic scholars, Abraham Abulafia, said that the relation, this is his beliefs being encapsulated by Edel, the relation between the Messiah and the body of Satan is one of ruler and subject, which in Abulafia's opinion expresses the relation between the Jewish Messiah and Jesus. Edel observes that in the two passages that he examines, Satan and Jesus occupy the same positions. So this is absolute proof that this is the Kabbalistic understanding of Christianity. So we have to go from the original Gnostics who believed that Jesus was Satan to the Kabbalists to the present day who believe that Jesus is Satan. So it should be apparent to Christians that Christianity is a trap. This is written by an eminent Kabbalistic scholar in 2004. Judging from the Midrash, the Christians will have their long-awaited second coming. Only their Christ and the Antichrist will actually be one and the same person. This is the Gospel of Judas, which is a very old Gnostic book that was referred to by the early church fathers. It is fully authentic. We have a copy of it. And it talks about how the disciples of Christ are actually deceivers who are leading Christians into the slaughter, and that Christians represent cattle who are being given as human sacrifices to Yahweh. This is the brazen serpent Neheshtun, who is hung upon a cross in the same way that Christ was. Neheshtun is the poison of the serpent converted into the cure. Neheshtun represents the ripening of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil when the wine becomes kosher and gives immortality instead of death. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing screen.
Now, it seems like Judaism is, it seems like there's no real good in any of this. It seems like what's behind Judaism is just in order to set up Christians in the Christian belief system to be damned by this God, Yahweh. So I don't see how any of this can benefit humanity in any way. And I'm wondering, we can see where it's very obvious, like you said, where all this is leading to, these transhuman agendas and everything that we're turning into today, worshiping technology and putting nature by the wayside is where we're being steered. It's very obvious. But what do you think is the answer to escape from this? Do you think that, the pagans or pre-Romans had it right with their belief systems and their spiritual beliefs, and that we were actually hijacked by this evil entity? How do you feel about that?
I think the Greeks were extremely wise, and they anticipated all of this. And I think they looked around, and the original idea was there is the process of the day. You have the sun arise on the horizon in the morning, and they viewed that as a replication of creation each day, and that the day was the good time, but there was also the night, and it was necessary for this cycle to go through, and that they believed ultimately there would be a conflagration, which would then produce a new, beautiful beginning. And they also had the idea of a savior figure in Virgil, but all of that was hijacked. I think you described it exactly correctly. They are setting us up for our own destruction. If people want to go back to pagan beliefs, I wouldn't object to it. I personally would like to move forward because we have to undo a lot of the damage that this knowledge has caused. Yeah. And I think we will have to utilize science and technology in order to somewhat undo the damage that science and technology have caused. And in that sense, as Paracelsus said, yes, the poison can become the cure, but it has to be placed in the hands of people who actually want to resolve the damage and reverse it, and then restore the processes of nature back to the earth. And instead, we have all the movements being subverted by this same group. The green energy movement has been subverted so that forests are being cut down to fuel green energy plants, which only accelerates the destruction of nature. As you so aptly mentioned, transhumanism, post-genderism, post-humanism are all movements being presented by people who present themselves as if they are interested in the benefit of humanity, when all of these things represent the complete destruction of humanity. So what to do about it? What I'm doing about it is exposing where this agenda came from. This helps us identify who is behind this agenda. I think that they have been very successful in turning the Abrahamic faiths of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and as well in creating communism, which was originally created by the early Christians, Carpocrates and Epiphanes, into this quest to believe that human beings are evil by nature. I think we need to convince people that human beings are not evil by nature, because the viciousness of this concept is followed by, they create the problem, then they propose the solution is that the salvation of mankind must be the destruction of mankind. So they have Christians, to a lesser extent, most Jews are atheists, so they're not involved in it, but to a lesser extent, the Kabbalists and the Islamic faiths, all working towards the destruction of humanity based upon the myth that humanity must be killed to be saved. And I think Christians actually have the worst conception of it, because they believe that the world to come will be in heaven, so that in order to ascend to heaven, they have to destroy the present world. They were the first to utilize the term the world to come. They have to destroy the present world and create a world to come in heaven. They view their flesh as evil and the source of evil lusts. So they have a hatred of human nature and human flesh. I hope that if we can wake people up to this, we can show them how they have been duped and how we need to very much oppose this growing escalation towards nuclear war. We have to oppose the manipulation of our DNA to create transhumans. We have to oppose this idea that the brain should be butchered and have silicone inorganic chips placed into it, which can then manipulate thoughts and create a slavish consciousness, which will be like an automaton or a robot, which will serve as slaves. This was always part of the plan, was to utilize the poison of knowledge as the ultimate cure to create a race of slaves to do all the labor, so that, again, instead of nature doing it, human beings have become the gods, and they can create these living entities, these living beings, which used to be the domain of the gods and exclusively the domain of the gods. They can then cease to believe in the gods, believe themselves to be gods, which in itself converts them into gods. And they become the masters of chaos, because through their thoughts, through their consciousness, they can utilize technology to manipulate chaos to create whatever they want, including a race of slaves. So this is the fulfillment of that ancient agenda. When people come to understand that and understand that they have been duped, we vastly outnumber the very small minority at the top of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam who are aware of all this, and we can defeat them and defend ourselves. And then we can do whatever it is that we can think of to try to reverse the destruction of nature and restore the earth to its natural processes. That's my hope. I don't hold out that much hope that it's going to be successful, but it sure as hell is worth trying.
Well, I
because
hope
the
so,
alternative is extermination, and that is the agenda. The agenda is to create, they have this mythology that Adam was originally an androgyne, and within that androgyne, there were 600,000 divine souls, 600,000 sparks of the gods. When Adam was cut in half to create Adam and Eve so that there could be childbirth for this process of reincarnation to take place, so that all these souls could be perfected ultimately. The souls were divided into 600,000 half souls, and half of the soul is male, half of the soul is female, which is why human beings seek out their divine soulmate. If you marry the woman who was actually your female half of your soul before Adam and Eve were cut in half, you will have a perfect marriage and a happy marriage. And if both the male half of your soul and the female half of your soul have undergone the process of rectification through reincarnation, which began 6,000 years ago, then that marriage will produce great children and will be a happy marriage. If, on the other hand, you meet the wrong woman, who is the other half of the soul of a different man, you engage in what they refer to as prostitution. And that will create a very unhappy marriage and children who are effectively abominations, who have mixed the cross souls of these two people. And that's how they interpret divorce and unhappy marriage and bad children. So they have all of these mythologies. But their goal is to restore those 600,000 souls back into their original androgynous state. Since they believe that all of these 600,000 souls, and these are the souls of the Israelites, again, the souls of non-Israelites, supposedly came from Eve and Satan, who fornicated in the Garden of Eden. But let's just deal exclusively with what the Kabbalists are after. Since these 600,000 souls came from Adam and Eve, they want them to be restored by one person. That one person will be the Messiah, son of David. There is an organization, a religious cult called Chabad Lubavitch, which daily prays for the arrival of the Messiah, son of David. They chant, "We want Mashiach now," which means they want this Messiah, son of David. The Messiah, son of David, is the vessel that contains the soul. The soul is different from the vessel. The soul was the soul of chaos that was contained by Jesus. That's why Jesus had to be killed to free up his soul, so that soul could enter the second-born body of Messiah, son of David. Chabad Lubavitch is also organizing, returning Jesus to the Jewish people so that he becomes that satanic advocate on the ultimate day of atonement, the ultimate day of accusation and judgment. So they want to buy Jesus back with $2 million worth of silver shekels minted in the temple. And that will then allow the soul of Jesus to enter the Messiah, son of David, and fill the vessel of his body. Because as you can see in this depiction of Abraxas, the two serpents are one being, body and soul. So the soul has to enter the vessel. The significant thing is that Jewish people should realize that they're going to try to make these 600,000 androgynous immortal beings out of that Messiah, son of David, who will simply be some man that they say is this Messiah. They have also developed the technology to create egg cells out of skin cells. So they could utilize the seed of this man as well as the eggs made out of his skin cells to create 600,000 androgynous embryos in laboratories to populate the earth, and then convert all other human beings into transhuman robots, which are controlled through a computerized system that creates a synchronicity of these robots. And these are not my ideas. I'm not pulling this out of the air. This is all being widely discussed in academia at the highest levels. So I fear that their ambition is to exterminate all the rest of humanity and create 600,000 immortal androgynes out of their Messiah, son of David. And another thing that leads me to believe this is that they believe after the cleansing of the earth, all of humanity derived from Noah, which is a single man. So it seems that they view the fulfillment of all of these cycles, the original creation of Adam as one man who was an androgyne, and then Noah as what they're after. And all of the technologies that they have created are fulfillment of this plan to replicate what they believe as the cycle of Noah and Adam as the new beginning of the world to come.
Man, this is incredible. We have a few minutes left. Let's close on this. They're apparently, it's obvious they're trying to make science the new religion because the Abrahamic religions, people, people aren't religious anymore. People aren't really going to church anymore. They aren't following these religions, so they have to push people towards this transhuman era in a new way, and seems like they're making science a form of indoctrination and religion that people will just blindly follow. Do you see this the same way? And the second part of that is I see a lot of people waking up to this, and I don't think that it's going to be sustainable because I don't think enough people will be on board with the madness, but I don't know.
Let me deal with the second part first. They are very good at manipulating their opposition to serve them in various ways, just as they duped the people who are concerned about the forests into utilizing green energy, which actually manifests the destruction of the forest. They are very good at manipulating politics and religion to get people to destroy themselves in the name of saving themselves. You are tremendously insightful. This worship of knowledge, of science and technology is absolutely their goal. That is what Jesus represents. He represents the worship of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is the worship of science and technology. And there was a whole, there were a 2-volume set written by Rabbi David Bosked, in which he identified this Messiah, son of Joseph, and the evil serpent as the same being as the Kabbalists always did. But he then went further and said that this is now science and technology, that the evil serpent and the Messiah, son of Joseph, are science and technology, which is exactly what you described. So that is the current Kabbalistic belief, and that is precisely what they want people to do, is to worship the Messiah, son of Joseph, who is science and technology. So you really hit the nail on the head.
That is insane. Man, this is fantastic. This is very important information. People really need to hear this. What's the best way that people can find your work and your books?
At my website, cjbbooks.com. There are no spaces, dashes, or hyphens. It is cjbbooks.com. My initials, books.com. That's the best way. I have links there where they can find places to buy my books. My books are available both in paperback and as PDF files.
Yeah, this has resonated with me a lot. The information makes almost too much sense, and I'd love to talk with you again in the future about this.
Oh, anytime. Thank you very much. You're extremely insightful. Thank you for giving me so much time to express all this. I do think it's very important for people to investigate this. My book, Beware of the World to Come, has been out for years now. No one has published any refutations of any of it. It has stood the test of time. Quite the contrary. Prominent rabbis have been copying many of the things that I reveal in my book. Now that the information is out, they view this as a sign that the end times are being fulfilled, because they have the belief that at this end time, all of this knowledge will become common knowledge.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, Christopher, thank you so much. And like I said, we'll definitely have to talk in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I've enjoyed it. And again, thank you for being so kind as to let me show all my slides and explain everything.
Of course, I love it, man. We'll do it again. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. See y'all then.